puzzle today is called The River. We've had this recommended to us a lot, and having read the rules, I can sort of understand why. It sounds completely and utterly, well, sort of a cross between ridiculous and unimaginably brilliant.
Oh, Lord, that... You've called the puzzle yucks, but this is anything but yuck. This cannot be an 8, because if this is an 8, there are 3 ways of making a 2-cell 8 arrow. 1, 7, 2, 6, or 3, 5. This is an 8, which forces this arrow to be 9, 1. That is stunning. That is beautiful placement of those arrows. That is just magic.
If orange keeps going right, the world ends, because orange doesn't have any digits left in row 1. But now orange has to get out of this box ASAP.
4 is here, and 5, so this is high. Ah, bingo, of course. How are we going to connect that low and that high on this line? 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. We're in. We're in. That is the break-in.
3, 7, 2, 8. And now we know that there is 2 and 8 because there is one of 3 and 7 in here. In fact, this cell is a 1 or 9. Wait a second. Have I broken this? No, I haven't broken this. No, I haven't broken this. One of these ends must be a 3, 7.
Now I've got 8 cells in grey. That's rather beautiful, because that cell is now green. If it's grey, and this cell would have to equal 15, now I know how grey finishes. So these 2 cells sum to 15. So they are 7 and 8, and there's an 8 here. This puzzle is so, so clever.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the stream. Welcome Kodak and David Retner, and of course welcome to Woofers and Jacob.
Hi. I'm Woofer.
Hello.
Jacob's the other one.
Yeah.
I know that was one of the questions that we had.
Yeah. I was half expecting you guys to play like a trick where you say that the other one is the other one. And maybe you did, and I'm just tricking everyone along with you. We'll never know until the end of the interview. That would be funny.
Tallcat knows what I look like.
That was a question from Logan Wall, which of you is Woofer and which is Jacob, and he also asked which is something we should get out of the way right away. How do you pronounce your name, Woofer?
wooferzfg. You know, it's a weird story. The name I came up with like 9 years ago because there's this Zelda Ocarina of Time speedrunner named ZFG1, and I just kind of stole his name and put Woofer at the start of it. Yeah.
I remember someone mentioning when you I think debuted or something about the Zelda speedrun person, and I wasn't sure if that was you or if it was someone you stole the name from.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, it was kind of weird. The first time that I had a puzzle on CTC, there was a bunch of people who had, watched the channel once in a while. They knew me from speedrunning, and they were just like super surprised to see my name on there.
Right. All right. To get started here, first of all, thank you to my patrons. So put the Patreon supporters up on screen. One of the names is pretty familiar to this crowd here. Thank you, Woofers. Woofer. I need to not call you Woofers because that's sort of what I've internalized in my brain as your name. I need to Woofer. Don't say the Z. I think we might have gotten a little bit of a lag there. We tried to mitigate that beforehand, but Discord be Discord, right? So if there's a little bit of lag, we'll just have to deal with that. And in the Patreon supporter section, we ask questions which are not quite as puzzle related. For example, where are you guys individually situated in terms of location.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm in the new.
Please, Discord. All right, I think we're back. It says OBS is reconnected.
Nice.
The 2 webcams are a problem. We can alternate who has video on.
I mean, it should be like, in terms of technical things, it should be fine considering my output and input internet speeds. But of course, anyone who knows Canadian internet should know that, yeah, they do not like to give us actual speeds that are representative of what we're paying for. So there's definitely some sketchiness going on with that stuff. Yes, can you answer again where you're from? And Discord hopefully doesn't censor you.
Yeah, I'm in the New York City area. Been here for about a year, and before that I was in Chicago.
I live in Toledo, Ohio, which is in the northwest Ohio, right on the border to Michigan area.
Right, okay. GPS coordinate, I'm sure.
Latitude, no.
What do you guys do for work?
I'm a software engineer. I've been working from home for a while, though.
I work at the local school in their technical department.
Nice.
It's an art school, yeah.
Cool.
And you play poker, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's part of, yeah. Sometimes.
Nice. Do you win big, or is it up and down? Oh no, come on. Discord, come on. It's not even, you can even see the chat and everything. It's just
Technically a winning player.
technically a winning player. Okay.
Yeah, I'm net positive dollars.
Nice. Yes, a little bit of lag again, Kodak. I don't understand how the upload and download would be related in terms of the, because obviously I could see you just fine before we started the stream, so that's only the download, so why is the upload changing that? Anyways, so save the game. Checkpoint. That's not how it works, unfortunately. What were we talking about before we got? Oh right, poker. Someone had asked Texas Hold'em or a different sort of variant of poker.
Just no limit hold'em. That's all I play. I've dabbled a little bit in PLO, but it's not as well of a known solved game, so I don't like to just gamble. I'd rather play games with known strategies that you can win in consistently.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any hobbies or interests outside of puzzling, other than poker?
Well, we both played the Wind Waker randomizer before and did races of that. I think neither of us has played in a few months, but I guess we also helped organize the tournaments for that, which was pretty cool. And then in general, we've done speed runs. I've been around like the speedrunning community for 9 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So
we in the season 4 tournament of Wind Waker, we were second and third place, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And we play in winners bracket grand finals or
We were in winners finals.
winners bracket finals. Yeah, we
And
played
then everything
each other.
fell apart.
Yeah.
Was it
And I
a
quit winning.
coincidence that you were the host of the tournament, or? I'm just joking.
No, not really. There's like a bunch of really good players, and we had like 30, 40 entrants total.
At the time, we were playing the most, probably. I was doing the most races, and you were right there in like second or third.
Yeah.
I think we were doing it all the time, like
Right.
just racing 3, 4, sometimes more times a week. And these are like 2-hour-long races.
Right.
So
Cool.
yeah, it's fun.
Do you guys have any pets? Other than Woofer being a small dog, as Talkat said before.
No, I don't have any pets. It's just me here.
Yeah, I don't have any pets here. My parents have 4 cats. So whenever I visit them, I get to see them. But I think having pets now wouldn't be a good idea considering how much I travel.
Right.
Maybe in the near future, though. I'm actually much more of a cat person, despite my username.
Interesting. I don't know if we'll have time to go through all of favorite movie, TV, food, and music, but which of those stand out to you, and what's your favorite of those? Pick like 2.
I was gonna say, Wilbur, you should talk about music because that's like your other most favorite thing.
Yeah, I go to a lot of concerts. I don't know if I can pick a favorite band right now. I can pick a favorite TV show. Everyone should watch Mr. Robot. It's on Amazon Prime. Especially if you like hacking. It's like the only show that has very realistic depictions of that stuff.
Interesting.
My favorite TV show is probably The Vampire Diaries.
Okay.
Or the
Interesting
originals.
choice.
Yeah, I love that show. I love both of those shows.
Cool. All right. How do you balance puzzling with other things in your life?
Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I work on Sudoku during work, and it's not good.
I was just gonna say the same thing. There's not a balance. It's just like when there's an idea for a puzzle, that's it.
Right. Yeah, the other day I was like, okay, I have a meeting at 9:30, but then there's also this puzzle that needs to get done, and I think I was up till at least 3 a.m.
The one day, weren't we working on the one puzzle one of the days this week till like 5 a.m. or something like that?
Yeah.
And I was like, my alarm goes off at 7:30, but this is fine.
Yeah. It's really not fine. It's not super healthy, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Overall.
It is fun. Keeps things interesting.
That reminds me of a question, and I guess we're now into the puzzle part question, so I will do that and ask this question, which is related to that. So I know my sort of creative vibes only come around when they feel like sort of coming around, and then I'm like, I'm gonna work on a puzzle right now, and it's important that I want to be working on the puzzle in order to actually get anything interesting going on. How does that work when you're always, or maybe you're not always, but how does that work when you guys are setting together? Like, do you both have to be sort of like feeling the creative vibes, or?
Yeah, so I think usually I'm the one who comes up with like the base idea for the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily the break-in, but
Right.
what rule set should we do, what
Right.
might be the overall thing that we do, and then the actual, time that we put into setting the puzzle, that happens in voice chat.
Yeah, I'm not super creative in most ways, so he has to come up with a really cool idea, and then I can sort of like, try and help.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
mean, sometimes we'll talk about it in like Discord chat where I'll throw out something and then Jacob will give some thoughts on whatever I said, and then I'll think about it more, and then we'll kind of settle on some potential rule set. But yeah, a lot of the like creativity is just um, me trying to think of stuff. And sometimes, also we'll solve some puzzle that's really cool, and then we'll talk about it while we're solving and be like, oh, this might be interesting to set with and with some other rule set, but a similar concept. And then eventually, maybe a few days later, we'll have some way to turn that into a puzzle.
I think that's like one of the more common things that happens. We solve a puzzle we really like, or maybe we see one on Zeta's stream or Rank
Yeah.
stream or a CTC video of a puzzle, and the constraints seem really cool. And it seems like it might go really well with this other type of constraint that we like, and
Mhm.
we want to try and combine them or something.
Right. So you don't often
Yeah.
like go off on your own and try to work on an idea and then come together later, or it's always together.
The actual working on the idea once it's there, we've been trying to do that in voice chat pretty much
Right.
entirely. We used to do more asynchronous
Mhm.
puzzle settings sometimes where we would message back and forth, and we found that to be a lot more difficult to communicate. So I'd say over the last 6+ months now, we've pretty much just been setting in voice chat.
It,
And then,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say the whole thing of being inspired by a puzzle that actually happened recently. We solved 2 to 10th asymmetry puzzle, the one with the arrow and the diagonal, anti-diagonal.
Mhm.
And I think we had talked months ago before that about potentially setting some sort of anti-diagonal puzzle, and solving this again was the extra inspiration. And then we ended up coming up with a Renban puzzle that didn't have an anti-diagonal constraint, because the conversation we had was a Renban that covers the whole diagonal is really an anti-diagonal constraint. But then the puzzle we came up with didn't even end up having a 9-cell Renban because we found something different. But it does have a Renban that goes through 3 boxes, so it was
Right.
really inspired by that 2 to 10th concept, though.
Cool.
Yeah.
So many different ways we could go from here, but or did you have anything to say, Jacob, before we continue on that topic?
Yeah, just really we really found that setting when we were sending each other messages would happen, and I think this happened both ways too, more so earlier, where we would one of us would send an idea of like that we'd put into a grid, like a partial puzzle, just like a potential little couple of clues that work together. And then by the time the other person had thought about it and figured out everything it did and had like solved it and sent it back for feedback, the other one of us was already on the next step with more clues added in.
Right.
To like something else to do. And that just made it to where, and I think we both kind of felt this way, where like one person's just always behind, not really, having a chance to, you're always one screenshot behind, or sometimes you even in DMs when you're talking about a lot, you might even miss a screenshot. And so you don't even know that the other one is like 3 clues ahead with what they're putting in there. So, and that just got to be way less, it just was way less fun that way. And that's when we decided to just do all of our stuff in the voice chat.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I definitely have had collaborative experiences where it's like, you don't like that clue, So I'm just going to continue for just a second without your clue. Like, and then you get way too far and you're like, okay, now I need to go back and actually continue with the clue that we were using. Yeah, so that it's just definitely more asynchronous and less mesh. Let's
I'd like
go.
to answer Zeta's question.
Yeah, for sure.
About the puzzle name. So our second latest puzzle is called Beldum, which I didn't even know about this word when we came up with the name, but it's named after one of the shadow sirens in Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, and their names are Beldum, Vivian, and then Marilyn. And we actually have another puzzle named Vivian, and the thing about the shadow sirens is that they're all purple, so we named our Renban puzzles after them. And we actually have a bunch of other puzzles that are named after characters from that game. It's kind of subtle, though, unless you know. It just sounds like a name or a word.
Yeah.
It just looks like you misspelled Bedlam.
That's what I thought it was. I thought the word was Bedlam, and then I had to double check by looking up the character's name.
Yeah.
Wait, it also said there that in the movie Coraline, the mother is named Beldam. I wonder if that's connected. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, Jacob.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that it's just that video game is, I think we would both say it's one of our favorite video games ever. So that's why we're naming the puzzles after characters and things from the game.
Right.
We actually, I don't know if this is what we're talking about. We actually started doing a playthrough of that game together recently. Although it's been sort of stalled by constant new ideas for puzzles, which is kind of funny. But then the puzzles end up named after characters from the game, so it's the same thing, really.
Yeah, you're basically procrastinating the game by honoring the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's circle back to more of the first question that I usually ask people when I interview them, which is, what is the first puzzle that you ever set? And we'll go one at a time, and then we'll talk about the first puzzle you ever set together, okay? Who wants to go first?
Woofer should go first.
I think you should go first because your puzzle was first.
Really? I just felt like I had just talked a lot, so. Okay. Well, I guess the first puzzle that I set was the puzzle Biscuit. Mm-hmm. And it was going back, I think before I set that puzzle, I had started watching Cracking the Cryptic, and I'd been watching it for several months. And then I think it was around Woofer's birthday, I think. And I decided that we had talked about, and I had introduced him to the channel, and we had talked about some of the puzzles. And so I decided I was going to set a puzzle for him as like a birthday present. And that's sort of what the theme of the puzzle came up to. And there's other stuff in there, but it has like the thermos in the shape of like the W and then the ZFG. And then there's other sort of smaller things in there that are more reference-y to, like in the box 6, and this might be something that Woofer wants to talk about more, but the 3 circles are in the shape of the Live Split logo, which is a speedrun timing program that Woofer worked on. So that's also part of it. And then the 15 cage ends up being like a 6-9, and that's really funny. So there's just there's a lot of spoilers. Oh, I'm sorry, spoilers. Whoops.
I mean, it was one of 2 options, so not very many spoilers.
50-50. Yeah. But yeah, so that's the first puzzle I set. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think that 6-9 cage is single-handedly responsible for you not getting the experienced setter role in the CTC server. Because the person giving out that role that gave feedback to not put in disambiguating clues, So even though it was like supposed to be this thing that was kind of funny, if you just look at the puzzle, it's like, why is there one killer cage in the whole puzzle?
Yeah, but the puzzle's better with it in there.
Yeah.
I stand by that, and I will continue to stand by that because the puzzle is not made to be something like
Yeah.
super over the top, magnificent, whatever. It was made as a birthday gift to be cool and kind of funny in a way.
Yeah, and then it was done on CTC by Mark, who had no idea why any of the clues were letters or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my first puzzle it's called Fibonacci 16. So I think at some point I was just messing around in F puzzles and I had this weird idea of, can I put a bunch of Fibonacci digits in a row and make a valid Sudoku, like in a path? I wasn't even trying to set a puzzle at that point. I was just thinking, like, is it even possible to do this? And it was surprisingly hard because there's a bunch of ones in the sequence, because I was trying to put the digits in a row, basically.
Right.
And then there's 3 threes in a row at one point. So just putting any kind of path together that worked was challenging for me. And then eventually I got something that worked, and I was thinking, can I turn this into a puzzle now that somebody else can solve? So then I tried, basically I took the path that I had, got a solution, and then I did a dumb thing that no setter should do, which was just remove digits from the solution and hope that those are the givens. I think WikiHow tells you to set Sudoku like that, and it just didn't work, and it was terrible. And then I asked Jacob, like, what do I even do? And then he was like, what do you want your break-in to be? And so he helped me like refine the puzzle, which that whole process of refining it only took like 1 or 2 hours. So wasn't a very long set. So technically my first puzzle wasn't even a solo puzzle, but I did like come up with the core idea and the path for it. And then Ranks actually did it on stream recently, which was pretty cool.
Cool. I see it's not rated, so that's pretty cool of him to do.
Yeah, it's probably like 1 solve away from the rating.
Yeah. 13 without a rating is pretty sad.
Yeah.
Well, I think Woofers has already answered this question, but for Jacob, were you surprised how easy or hard it was to set a puzzle?
So when I first set Biscuit, I spent I was working on it for weeks because I wanted it to be really, really good, and I wanted to capture all of the things that it had in it. I wanted to be able to find a way to make all of that stuff work. And it was not easy, I thought, at least initially. And I say I was working on it for weeks. I started it and finished it after a few weeks, but I wasn't working on it every day, like sort of similar to more how we do puzzles now. I was sort of like working on it for a little bit when I had a couple hours or I wasn't doing anything. And then I maybe would take a day or two to just stop and like let it digest and think. And that's very much
Hello?
welcome back.
Okay. Well, Discord decided to restart itself, so maybe that will actually fix it, because it has made the chief decision that it needs to restart, which is a good decision on Discord's part. Good Discord. So hopefully we won't experience any more interruptions. But
fingers crossed, right?
Yeah, fingers crossed. All right. What on earth are we talking about? Yeah, the stream needs more likes for Discord.
Well, I think the last thing that sort of, I guess, I remember talking about was the question was about how difficult it was, I think, to
Right. Yes. Yes.
set a puzzle. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I thought it was before I tried, I didn't think I would ever be able to do it.
Right.
Is one thing. I was one of those people that was sort of like, oh, I could never make a puzzle. This is,
Yeah.
this is not. I'm not smart enough.
Hmm.
Whatever. And then when I made that puzzle, and I like I said, it took a long time, but now it sort of is like, oh yeah, anybody can set up
Yeah.
if they want to.
Anyone can. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's a lot more fun than the setting processes ended up being a lot more fun than I thought it. Before trying than I thought it would be. So,
Right. Yeah.
which is really cool.
Definitely.
Yeah, and on the topic of like what's your first puzzle, I think if you're counting non-pencil puzzles or Sudokus, we did set puzzles in the Wind Waker randomizer, which was
Oh, right,
pretty
yeah.
interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, so there were a bunch of them, bunch of puzzles that I came up with where I would set it and then I would send it to Jacob to test it out and then publish that to our Wind Waker randomizer racing community, and then a few people would end up trying to solve it. And all those puzzles involved using glitches in that game. So you really needed some good game knowledge, and
Right.
sometimes it would require finding something where some trick was required that nobody else had done before that I just found and put into this puzzle, and then other people would have to discover it while solving the puzzle. And then the last puzzle, I think, or two that I made it together with Jacob. The last one we like made it completely together from the beginning. So that, I guess that was our first like co-op puzzle, was in Wind Waker Randomizer.
Cool.
Yeah. Those puzzles were really unique in the sense that, like, at first, I think one of the things that Woofer had me doing with the ones that he came up with.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm not sure what is going on, to be honest. As I said in the stream chat, like, my ping is good. OBS settings suggest that everything is good. And then all of a sudden, it just tanks randomly. So I don't know what the issue is there. If it craps out one or two more times, we might try that option, woofer.
Okay.
But I'd rather stick to something I'm more familiar with, and have set up in terms of the OBS settings and all that. So if it is gonna work, that would be ideal. But if not, we can try out something else.
Mm.
Anyways, did we even get past that question? No, I don't think so.
I guess I was just talking a little bit about the Wind Waker puzzle. I don't know if you had something you wanted to add on to sort of what I was saying about how those puzzles worked, Woofer.
Not really. Yeah, it was just interesting, like to collaborate on that, because those video game puzzles, basically, like you can bypass them much more easily than you can with a Sudoku. And you also kind of have to come up with your own rules to some extent, while, Sudoku has the very predefined rules that are hard to break. There's also solvers for Sudoku. You don't really have solvers in a video game. So definitely, like, trying to avoid people bypassing your clues is much bigger of a problem there.
We had one where somebody found like a way to go completely through this wall that we both tried it, right, for a while, and we couldn't. So we were like, oh, nobody can get through this wall. This glitch doesn't let you do that. And then somebody did it, and then which was cool. But then Woofer sort of like adjusted the puzzle, be like, okay, now you have to do this puzzle, and you made the rule was like you can't grab onto this ledge, right? Was the rule you added, and so was basically how you get through the wall, and then but of course, really that just made it like there was a second puzzle, right? I guess it was something new that none of us had done before or even thought was possible, and then somebody figured out how to do it, which was cool.
Cool. What was the first more Sudoku puzzle that you guys set together?
We actually set a puzzle pack together, which was a big undertaking, and I wouldn't recommend doing that for anybody who's starting out. We came up with this idea called end chains, which is like 159, but you have a cycle of a certain length within bounds, and then those endpoints also have to get used. It led to some really interesting logic, and I actually think it's more intuitive than a lot of the other cycle puzzles that you see. But yeah, we set 12 12 puzzles together in that puzzle pack, and then we had testers on those in the CTC server. It was like private testing, and then eventually we put all those puzzles on LMD one day at a time, which some people didn't like.
Yeah, that was not, people weren't happy. Some people weren't happy. Some people were like, when's the next one? Which was cool. I like those people.
It was not really a deliberate reference
to cycle decomposition from group 3.
Yeah. I don't know that much math, I guess. I think our reason for calling it end chains is that because you can call it like a 3-chain or a 4-chain, so n was just the reference to the number, and we wanted people to refer to it as that. But besides that,
yeah, but it was before we really had heard something like that be called a cycle, and so we were talking about like 159 and be like, you could have something like that where it's like a chain of 3 or 4 or something like that. And so we just sort of called it that.
Right.
I guess.
Makes sense.
And then finding out later that the actual term was cycle. So we just sort of like incorporated that into the description of the rule set. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Coincidence.
Yeah.
So, when did you guys first start watching CTC? I think you said Jacob started watching before Woofers. Is that right?
I think so. Is that right?
Yeah, Jacob's seen way more CTC than me. He used to watch, I don't know if you still do, but every single Simon video.
I was watching every single Simon video and a lot of the Mark ones for about a year there. And recently it's sort of slowed down a little bit for me because we've been working on more puzzles, I guess, and also like to try and watch like the streams when I can too, your streams and Ranks and Zeta and all that stuff. And then we've been working on, I think we've been making more puzzles the last few months at least. We made a lot when we were working on the end chain pack at the very beginning, and then they were sort of like sprinkled, one or two here or there. And the last couple of months, we've been making a lot more. I feel like. Would you say, Woofer, would you say that's true? Or okay, it felt like it was true.
I started watching CTC probably in like last summer because Jacob got me into it. I never actually watched videos regularly. It was more just the puzzles I really liked. But around the same time, we also got into solving puzzles together because there was the murder mystery hunt on the CTC Patreon that was publicly available. So we solved that one all the way through. Those puzzles were really hard, by the way. I think some of the steps in that were I think a lot of what's on LMD now is significantly easier to see than some of the steps there, but it was a ton of fun.
We were newer then too, right?
Yeah, it's all the perspectives.
The one,
we kind of wanted to go back to it and see how hard it would be, but
the irregular one that's in there. Yeah, the regular one in that pack, didn't that take us like 5 hours or something, 4 hours, something like that?
Yeah, we had to kind of go through every digit and color every cell it can go in and find swordfishes, and then did that like 6 times.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if that was required, but it was.
It's what we ended up doing.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I almost remember doing that as well. So maybe. I don't know if it was for that puzzle.
And we also we solved all of Padlock together too before we got into setting puzzles. That pack was amazing as well.
Had you guys solved like Sudoku before, or even variant Sudoku before like seeing the channel?
Not before CTC. No, not before I found the channel.
I used to have like classic Sudoku books when I was a lot younger. I actually even think I tried setting puzzles back then as well, but they were like classic Sudokus where I didn't know how to do it. So it just didn't work.
Right.
But yeah,
classic before.
Yeah, but it was like I wasn't good at it and I did it on paper. I don't even own a pencil right now, so a lot has changed.
A lot has changed. Don't even own a pencil. How long did it take you guys to get your first CTC feature, like since you started setting puzzles?
Like of our together puzzles?
Well, individual and then together, I guess.
Well, I made the puzzle for Woofer Biscuit, and then Mark did that one. So that was my first.
Yeah, then my Wordle puzzle got on in like January or February. It was actually a bit frustrating because at the time we had submitted that Enchain pack to CTC and they didn't use it. And we put like 50 to 100 hours into that, and then this Wordle puzzle that I got done in like 3 hours by myself got featured right away, and I was like, yeah. Very good early lesson to learn is that the time does not correlate at all to success.
And then together, I guess your first CTC feature together, I think, was this Smorg puzzle, right?
Yeah, that one Simon did, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that one really did really well. As far as like number of people solving it. Is that still the puzzle we've done that's got the most solves, or?
No, it has 86 on LMD apparently.
Oh, I thought
98% rating. It's definitely I don't think it's that great. It's pretty interesting, but it doesn't have like if I had to pick my favorite puzzles, it wouldn't be in the top 3, but I think what it did really well was it struck this balance between approachable and interesting that people really love.
I feel like a lot of your guys' famous puzzles sort of live in that area of both being approachable and interesting, and also sort of visually enticing as well. I think is a hallmark.
I think those are our two like favorite goals, I would say. Interesting obviously is, you know, Trump, but then approachable is our, I think, would you say that's our second most like that we try to aim for?
I'd say to some extent, but I'd put like a big asterisk on that. It's not that we're afraid of setting hard puzzles. We actually have quite a few puzzles that are really tricky, but the thing we try to do is make sure that every step has an elegant way to do it, even if it's hard to see.
Right. Let's talk a bit about the solving together. Math Pesto had asked, in addition to setting together, you often solve together. He states this as a fact, or they state this as a fact. Can you describe that experience and how it has influenced your collaboration? I mean, you've already talked a little bit about how it inspires certain puzzles, but what's it like solving together? Do you solve every puzzle together, or just most puzzles?
You wanna?
Yeah. So we don't solve every puzzle together. We both do some puzzles on our own. Especially like the shorter ones.
If we solve a gas puzzle or like the
well, Jacob just does gas like very regularly, I think.
It'd be weird to group solve the gas, I think.
Yeah. I'm very behind. I'm like 3 months behind on it, but I've done several hundred of them.
Actually, I bet that you would get a worse time if you solved together on gas than if you solved individually, because you'd be interrupting each other and stuff.
Yeah. But when we actually do solve together, I think the most rewarding thing is that we get to talk through all the logic. I know some people, when they solve, they actually talk out loud even when they're solving alone, and I think that helps a lot. Not just for making sure you don't break it, but for really understanding the logic and making sure that you're kind of finding what the setter intends. And then one other thing that we do, and I've actually noticed Zeta doing this on stream sometimes, is let's say you put in some digits and you see some chain that breaks. What we try to do is we go back and we try to understand what's the simplest way to explain this logic here. We try to find the most elegant step for any, even when we're solving like somebody else's puzzle, we'll always try to do that, because I think it makes it a lot more enjoyable when you understand the elegant logic, and it's usually more likely to be what's intended.
A lot of the time, something that happens is I'll see something ridiculous because I kind of have like a little bit of that Simon thing that you see sometimes where he like sees something in like the 10 times more convoluted way than just like there's already a 4 in this row or you know whatever, and I'll be like, oh wait a minute, a 4 here, and I'll just see it and I'll say that. And the thing that Woofer's really good at is kind of like what's the best way to say it, like
condensing it or something?
Figuring out the question, right? Because it's always what question do you need to ask? He's really good at figuring out the question to ask. That is what makes that break or what makes that forced to be the true. Like, oh, there's just this cell is just always like a 7 or whatever. And I'll just notice I might see something like that and he'll be like, oh, and it's like figure out why, sort of. He's better at that, I think.
Right.
And then for me, it's like
you have an answer, but not the answer.
Right.
Yeah. And then, but I'd say overall, Jacob is definitely a better solver than I am. A lot of that is the experience with gas puzzles and just watching more CTC than me, I guess. But yeah, all of that, the thing we do when solving puzzles definitely carries over to setting, in the sense that when we're test solving, we need to do the same thing. And so whenever we find some step that we maybe like, and then we find some logic for it. What we try to do is we look at it from a different perspective and we see, is there a different way to see this that might be more elegant? And sometimes there will be multiple elegant ways to see a certain step. And at that point, we're really satisfied because it's more likely that a solver is going to find one of those ways. And actually, our most recent Renban puzzle, Ranks and Zeta both did that one on stream in the last couple of days. And they both did the break-in differently, and they both did the ending differently.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so that's kind of an example of when you put in clues and there's multiple ways to see it. For the ending part, we actually had thought about both of those ways of seeing it. So it wasn't surprising.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of them came up.
It was honestly really cool. I think we both thought it was really cool to see both ways be found. It kind of made it. Oh, what were you gonna?
Yeah, Zeta kind of was. It would have been a lot more difficult for him to find more ways because it relied on the bet tree, which neither of us chose on his stream. So
Right.
he had to get the more difficult way of seeing it.
Totally had a question. Oh, yes, of course. When you watch like the streams and stuff, do you guys watch those streams like together on a voice call or something, or just separate, or have you tried that, or is that completely not at all?
We have tried that, and I actually don't really like doing that because what happens is I'll want to talk about something and then you can't pause the stream. So
Right.
I think usually we just, if we're both watching at the same time, we'll just talk in text chat because it'll be easier to communicate while still watching.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we've done both. And I enjoy talking, but there is that negative side to it too. So I'm okay with usually whatever Woofer feels like he wants to do on that particular day.
Yeah. For the CTC features, we'll usually watch them at the same time together in a voice chat because there we can pause.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes sense. So if there was a stream that you didn't catch, would you rewatch it together, or would you...
We have done that before.
It really depends. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like impatient and I just want to watch it on my own. I don't want to wait.
Right.
I'm usually pretty indifferent. If I usually will just ask Woofer what he wants to do, and then he's like, you might be out of town that weekend or whatever. And he was like, I'm just gonna probably watch it whenever I get time. And then if he says that, then I'll just watch it myself, and then be like, okay, let me know when you watch it and we can talk about it, or whatever. And then, but if it's something where he's like, sometimes it's happened before too, where like we've been doing stuff beforehand, like working on something else or playing a game or something, and then it'd be like, oh, Zeta stream's about to start, and he's, we got a message from Tristan earlier. He's doing our puzzle today, so do you just want to watch it? And then we might do that. So it's very, very just sort of whatever. No, it's very in the moment. Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of disagreeing on what to do, directionally asks, what constraints do you guys both love / look for when solving, and what constraints does one of you love but the other not so much?
Do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, we actually talked about this question before today, and it was kind of hard because disagreeing on constraints. So I think I'm a lot more picky in terms of what puzzles I like solving than Jacob is.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's true of just things in general, because Jacob loves Marvel movies, which is like, yeah.
Can move on.
So in terms of what constraints terms of what constraints we both like, arrows, ren bands, region sum lines, lockout lines are probably some of our favorite. I think it's these constraints that offer a ton of flexibility and also kind of play into that whole Sudoku geometry thing where a digit can't go in a certain box.
Hmm.
That kind of logic is always really nice to see. And then I think we also are big fans of irregular Sudoku, probably more than most people are. I know a lot of people, they either like the standard boxes or chaos construction, but we've really enjoyed solving irregular specifically. For me, maybe it's that nostalgia going back to the murder mystery hunt with that flower puzzle.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We got to the end of that one too after hours and hours of working on it, and we were like really impressed, I think, and we really enjoyed it despite it taking us so long. We were like, that was really, it felt so satisfying. So there is probably a little bit of that nostalgia for irregular mixed in there.
Yeah, and in terms of like puzzles that or constraints that one of us likes and the other one doesn't, the one that we came up with was like 159 puzzles, which I said I don't like as much as Jacob probably does. And then also I think Jacob included a bunch of killer cages in his puzzles that he set, where I don't like solving killers or putting them in one setting. We don't have a single killer puzzle. But I don't know. I don't really have great reasons for that. I'd rather stay away from kind of ranking constraints and comparing them, because to some extent I think that limits what you can actually pull off when setting and solving, because there are great puzzles with literally any constraint.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I kind of am like we obviously have that list that we all really like, and like he was saying how he's a bit more picky. I'm very much a more laid back person, I think. So usually it always comes down to I'm just like, oh yeah, you think that puzzle looks cool? Okay, yeah, let's solve it. Or oh, those constraints sound interesting. Okay, yeah, let's try and solve the puzzle. I'm down. Let's go for it. I'm kind of very I'm easy, like he said, the Marvel movie thing. I guess that makes me someone I would describe as I'm easily entertained, easily pleased, I guess. So yeah, it's hard for me, and he's become probably this as well as anybody. I don't usually end up having too much like negative to say about things in terms of like art, music, movies, TV shows, puzzles, anything like that, video games. Very much, I usually am more about just talking about the things I liked about any
right.
given thing. So, and that just lends itself to being like, oh yeah, that was fun, that was cool, with pretty much everything. I like that movie. Yeah, it's good.
Right.
Check it out. And that's sort of just how I am.
I think Zeta's point in chat is really good. He said he thinks some constraints lend themselves to building one really great puzzle with. I definitely agree with that. There are some constraints where you can have more of a variety in logic. Those are the ones that we probably enjoy more for setting and solving. And then one thing for setting that we really try to do, at least that's for me is a big thing with the ideas that I try to come up with, is we really don't want to set the same puzzle more than once. So we do have, two Renban puzzles, but those two puzzles have very different ideas. One of them is focused on geometry, and then the other one is more about which digits can go on which Renban. And then for a bunch of other constraints, we just have one puzzle with a certain combination. So
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys find more enjoyment in the solving process or the setting process, would you say?
Ooh, tough. I don't know. Probably in the setting process, I would say. I don't know how you feel. I think we end up having more fun when we're setting puzzles. But I don't know, maybe not. Solving puzzles is a lot of fun too.
Yeah, it's kind of
It's
tough.
tough.
I think with setting, the final product is really rewarding, but
Mhm.
then for solving you kind of get a much more consistent experience. That's the levels of stress when setting are a lot higher. When solving, it's like no pressure.
I know it's.
Um,
I think you get especially the setting process is especially stressful for you because you lose a lot of sleep when we're in the middle of a puzzle.
yeah, I guess that too. Uh, I'd actually compare setting puzzles. So in speedrunning, there's something called tool assisted speedrunning where you can kind of put together a speedrun where every single input in the game is predetermined. And the goal is kind of to create this theoretical best possible speedrun.
Hmm.
And trying to do that for a video game is actually extremely stressful and tedious because you end up redoing a lot. You'll have like thousands upon thousands of re-records where you're going back to this previous frame and trying a different input.
Right.
But then the final product is the most satisfying thing that you could like possibly have because you get to watch it and happen in full speed, and it's just like, how did I even do this? And I think setting puzzles to some extent is comparable to that, while solving is like just playing a game.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, you don't solve a puzzle by like figuring out what exactly you need to do and then do it in that exact order. The entire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty clear that you guys find some inherent enjoyment in the setting process. So would you set puzzles even if no one would solve them, if you were like the last person on Earth? Or last people on Earth? I guess you could solve each other's puzzles.
And honestly, what it would come down to me would probably if we were the only two people on Earth, and he was like, "Do you want to make another? I have this new idea for Renban puzzles. Do you want to make a Renban puzzle?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it."
Okay.
That's how I think the situation would go from my perspective. I don't know if
Yeah.
that question would ever come up.
I do think a lot of our satisfaction though comes from at least getting some sort of validation. So like if we could send puzzles to each other, that would be fine. But if we're setting together and there was no one to solve it, I think we probably wouldn't. But even just having comments from like one or two people would probably be enough.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like we get a comment on a puzzle on LMD and we're both like, "Yay! This puzzle was a huge success." One
Yeah,
comment on
especially when
LMD.
it's somebody who's kind of picky with what they comment on and enjoy. Pretty
Yeah.
nice to know
Yeah, for sure.
when your puzzle is actually good.
Speaking of that, what if you guys remember, what is the best OMD comment you've ever had on one of your puzzles?
This is Whooper's question.
Yeah, I have a good answer for this. So the
Oh.
puzzle Loop Aquarium that we put out, we published that I think about a month ago, and that puzzle was very clearly inspired by Philomeno Aquarium from Fistamafel, and then also Fistamafel had some Slitherlink puzzles that he published in around April, I think. One of them was the April Fool's one, and
Yes.
then there was the Slitherlink Liars. So we were thinking for Zeta's setting challenge, what pencil puzzles can we combine? And I really wanted to combine Aquarium with some sort of pencil puzzle that basically divides the grid into regions. And then the thing that we realized is that Fistamafel's touching Slitherlink puzzles, like, why not just do touching Slitherlink? Especially since in Fistamafel's puzzles, there was actually rules about regions that the Slitherlink divides the grid into. So this Loop Aquarium puzzle was kind of a combination of 3 different Fistamafel puzzles. And then it was cool to get a comment from him about a month ago now, where he said that he loved the idea and that the actual puzzle was phenomenal. So kind of came back full circle, and that was nice. There's definitely puzzles where we set them and then I have specific people in mind for who I would love to see solve it. and it's very satisfying when they do and they enjoy it.
Definitely. Do you have a favorite like YouTube comment that you've ever read, or a type of YouTube comment that you would get on features or whatnot?
You know, I don't know. The only this is not a good answer to this question, I feel like. But the only YouTube comment I remember on one of the videos that stood out is not even have anything really to do with me, but it was a comment from the adventure puzzle video that Woofer did.
Yeah.
I literally just pulled that up, so that's funny. We were thinking of the same thing.
Yeah.
You guys might be conjoined twins after all.
The neural link.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You should, if you want to talk about it.
Yeah. So back in it was in April, I think, where I remember this comment or this thing that Simon said in the Ask Simon and Mark channel in the CTC server, where he asked for a solution to solve Adventure, which is this puzzle from the Galactic Puzzle Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a video for how to solve that. And then one of the comments on there, I don't know if I can actually find it. Let me try. It was very negative, and they were basically saying, if you're so smart and you can solve this puzzle, then why don't you go cure cancer? And that you're just completely wasting your time.
That's a very weird question. That's a very weird response.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of comments on like scientific articles that are like, why are they wasting time on this? People are dying. Like, that's not their area of expertise, you idiot. Like, they can't cure cancer because they have no idea about it. Like, what?
Yeah, and I do have a confession to make. I never actually solved the puzzle on my own. I looked up the solution and read it and understood it and then made a video. So I'm not actually smart enough either.
It was funny because I also felt a bit of like emotional investment when that comment came out, because I did all of the art for the little graphics and stuff in the puzzle, or in the video. Sorry, in the video, misspoke there. But I was like, who's this guy trying to tell us how we should spend our time or whatever? But also, we joke about that comment a lot. Because we both found it so funny.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can definitely imagine jokes about that.
It took like a week of Woofer talking about that puzzle for me to even understand how the solution and the puzzle worked. Like, he was telling me all about it and the solution and how he was going to do the video, and it took me a very long time to even fathom the puzzle itself, but eventually I got there. So that was actually really satisfying, was actually figuring out what the puzzle even was and how it worked.
What a puzzle.
Yeah.
To jump back into the setting side of things, Zetamanth asked an interesting question about would you say all your puzzles are 50-50 collabs or more like 80-20 collabs?
This is another really good question. I think Woofer should answer it because he's.
You can't keep saying that.
Well, this is. I mean, when we talk about it, you have so many.
Are you going to answer the question 50-50 or 80-20?
80-20, yeah.
Yeah. So I think earlier on, like, this is something I mentioned earlier, we were setting more asynchronously, so we would message back and forth. And at that point, there were definitely puzzles where one of us would kind of come up with all the clues and the other person would just give feedback on that. Especially in the End Chains pack, like, there were 2 puzzles in there where one of them Jacob set basically the whole thing, and then one of them I set the whole thing. Actually, I think there were 2 that Jacob set the entirety of it. Then I kind of just responded and tested throughout the solve. But more recently, in the last 6 months or so, it's been very 50-50. Unless you want to give me credit for coming up with the like base puzzle ideas, then maybe like 55-45. But I do feel like we both contribute a ton to every puzzle.
I think it's a product of that end chain pack where we were sort of like, we realized that once we started like sitting down for the later puzzles in that pack, and we started sitting down in a voice chat and actually both talking and thinking about each individual clue and what the grid looked like after each one and what we wanted the theme and the ideas of the puzzle to be, we realized that it was just way more fun to talk about it, and the puzzles ended up way better. Just not like better, but they just, we were happier with them. And I think in general, with once we started setting that way. And even some of those earlier ones where they were a bit more like, I add a clue, you add a clue over DMs back and forth. A couple of those in the end chain pack, we even went back and we just kind of talked about them and changed a lot of the clues to be more of what we had in the later puzzles.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's more closer to 50, and probably like he said, more like 55-45, just because one of the other things we talked about with this is, and he mentioned it already, but Woofer's definitely way better at coming up with break-ins and themes for the puzzles, and I'm more better at like trying to find. I think the biggest skill that I've brought to the table is finding ways to resolve the puzzle and seeing where the deadly patterns are sort of like manifesting and being like, well, this clue can do these cool things, but also prevent us from having to deal with a deadly pattern. And that's, I guess, where I think my biggest contribution comes from.
And also making sure we don't break the puzzle, especially in a chaos construction. Like Jacob's usually been the one to draw the regions in some way where there's like only one or two ways to draw them to actually get the puzzle to resolve. I think that's really hard. You need a pretty deep understanding of Sudoku.
There's a couple puzzles I think I saved that way, that where we were like, is this even possible? And then I was like, well, let's see. Because what you break it down to, right, is like, okay, what's the problem in this version? It's like, oh, we can't fit 6 in row 5 or whatever. So you think, okay, which region still needs 6s? And then you just have to kind of, reconfigure it. Yeah. And there was one puzzle, I think I sat there, I can't remember which one it was because I can't remember. But like, there was one where I think I sat and I drew like 45 different sets of regions for the end. And then finally we got one that worked and we were able to make that and finish the puzzle. I can't remember. I don't know. You might remember what puzzle it was. I don't know if you do or not.
Well, there was one puzzle that was a CC that we set was border vision. Yeah. And I think I came up with every clue in that puzzle, but then Jacob drew the regions about halfway through. And then I based like the rest of the clues that I came up with to force those regions. And then the regions were like actually super interesting. And I don't know if there was another way to make it work.
That was where I spent forever drawing regions because we didn't think it was going to work. And then
I don't know if I was even capable of unbreaking that puzzle. So
yeah, because what happens, right, in a chaos construction puzzle when you get to that stage is you add in a clue and then it breaks, and you add another clue and then it breaks, and you add in, you remove those clues, you try a different clue and it breaks, and you try a different clue and it breaks, and you're like, okay, well, we needed to take a step back and see like, okay, we're missing something fundamental here, right? About like what's going on in this grid and what we still have flexibility left to even do anything with.
Yeah. And, it's been broken for 45 minutes and we've added 10 clues, but it was broken before we even added one of those.
That's the thing now that Woofer's gotten really, really good at. And I don't know if it's a slight paranoia thing, but it's like where like all along the way, if we're doing a chaos construction puzzle, he's very like, I'm gonna make sure there's still solutions for this, even if we've only filled in like one tiny little quadrant of the grid where it's like 90% or like 70% of the grid is still open, and I'm sitting here like, how can there be no solutions? But he always wants to double check, which is good, because if he had if I would just probably keep going and then break the puzzle and not figure out why and waste tons of time later on.
Yeah,
The most recent puzzle we did,
when the puzzle is broken is helpful.
yeah, the most recent puzzle we just finished is another really good example of that, I think, where he was drawing regions a lot along the way, making sure that it was still possible to finish the puzzle, and it was super helpful.
Yeah, I also used KNT's tip, which was to draw killer cages when you don't know all the regions.
Yeah. I have a very delayed video, which I was supposed to make in August, explaining that hint and other crucial tips to be able to set CC that I've just not made because I've been way too lazy to actually record it. But I should make that at some point, because it is very useful to know those things. They're very simple things, but it's good to know those things. Let's talk through a couple of the puzzles that you guys had said you wanted to discuss the process of setting them. Which of those four would you like to talk through?
We can go in order that we set them. So the first one of those was the river. So that one got featured on CTC, and it was pretty cool. Also, it inspired Jay Dyer's single line puzzle. And I know this because she said it in the testing submissions channel when she posted it originally.
That puzzle's awesome.
Yeah.
We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the puzzle we came up with, it has one single region sum line that covers the grid, and then there's some given digits, and really that's it. And the way we came up with this was we were trying to set a puzzle that it was like circles and squares it was a chaos construction. It was sort of like, I think Grockles had a puzzle that had the same rule set, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was counting like the number of regions within the 3x3 and then the number of cells within the same region in the 3x3. And we just couldn't get it to work at all. And then eventually Jacob just started drawing a line across the whole grid, as he does. When we set, it's always Jacob screen sharing and then I'm watching. So he sometimes draws patterns, and then he like drew a region sum line across the whole grid. And then we were both like, wait, what if this was a puzzle? What if it covered every single cell in the grid? And we tried getting that to work, and it was like very hard not to break it. But then the thing as we talked through it, we realized we don't actually need to cover the whole grid. We just need to cover enough of it that you can prove that there is at least one region that is entirely on the line. So we kind of came up with the core break-in idea, which is that the top left needs to not be able to escape the line. And then you also need to disprove that the sum is 9. Which our plan for that was to put in that 9 and 7 that you see in row 2, and then eventually add a given 2 somewhere in the column, and then have the line cover enough of the top left half of the grid for it to work. So, and then eventually we got through setting the whole thing, and then we had the break-in was basically the last part because we needed the line at the very end to cover enough of the bottom left for it to work. So yeah, definitely an interesting way to set a puzzle with that like inherent restriction from the beginning. Made it pretty challenging, I think.
That was definitely our most unique setting, like process, path, whatever you want to call it. That was very, very different from, because it was almost like we were setting it backwards.
Oh, reconnected. And we're back. Okay. Sorry. Brief interruption.
Yeah. So during the test solve of the river, actually, while we were setting it, we originally made a logical leap, and then we
Oh
got to the
no.
end of the puzzle. Oh, did it stop again?
No, I was saying, oh no, to the logical leap. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm getting paranoid about the stream. Yeah, so the logical leap was pretty bad, and we were like, how do we even fix this? And then we spent probably an hour or two redrawing the line until we found a way to actually get it to work. And then after that, I think we added one or two given digits to sort of smooth out the solve path at the end. And it was still really tough for Simon to do when he was doing it, the second half of the puzzle, although there was a couple of places where he was one step away from breaking through and then just didn't follow through the logic all the way. And there was a lot of comments on the YouTube video that pointed out things he could have done at various points.
Yeah. I think I often said, because I've watched back that one a lot because I like that puzzle so much, the Simon solve of it. And I think I've often said that in that video, he like left like partway through because he had to go do something. And he says in the video that he came back like 6 hours later. And I think I told Woofer, I think if he wouldn't have had to do that, the video probably wouldn't have been nearly as long. I think he sort of like left and like, you know, you go away for 6 hours, your brain gets out of that puzzle mode, especially if you're working on one specific puzzle. And you come back and you sort of have to, you know, what was I doing in this puzzle? And I think that lent itself to making the video a little bit longer than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never start a chaos construction puzzle when you have like 40 minutes before you have to leave for lunch.
Yeah, especially lunch with Kodak. I think it was he was meeting with Kodak actually. From what I
That's
remember.
funny.
So
Yeah.
you don't want to be late to that lunch. So. Okay, so what about Grotus or Grotus? How do you pronounce it?
I think it's Grotus. That's actually, that puzzle is named after one of the final bosses of Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door.
Of course.
And Simon showed a picture of Grotus when he was doing that one. It's like, because I think he usually Googles the title to try to figure out what it could possibly mean. But yeah, that puzzle was really interesting because, so before we were setting it, I implemented double arrows into Sudoku Studio because my thinking was I really want to have true candidates when we're setting this. So once I did that, we were able to use double arrows and the solver for that to try to come up with a break-in. And I think we were sitting in voice chat and we were just kind of drawing double arrows randomly until we came up with something that seemed like it was forcing stuff. And we had this break-in, and we figured out, it seemed like very mysterious what was actually happening because there was like 5 different digits that were forced. And it took us about a half hour to even figure out the logic there. And eventually we did. And it's like, wow, this is really cool. And we posted it, I think, in the break-in testing channel of the Skunkworks server. And in there, somebody solved it and they took about 20 minutes to get through the break-in. And they said, okay, I think this is fair, but it's definitely tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day we came back to the puzzle and we were thinking, like, is there a way that we can actually make this more elegant?
Right.
And so in the first row, there was originally a given 4 that we had, and that forced those 4 cells on the double arrow to have a minimum sum of 11.
Mm-hmm.
But we actually changed it to a given 2, and we noticed that it makes everything about 10 times easier because the minimum sum becomes 13, and neither of the circles can be 8. So you get 5 or more in each of the circles, and that's key because 5 plus 5 is 10 or more. And so you no longer, it basically eliminates where circles can go and really reduces the space of outcomes.
Right.
I think is what we try to do a lot is if we have an idea, often that idea will come from true candidates telling us something, but it's really important to be able to take that idea and present it in a way that's actually fun and something that a solver can find realistically.
Yeah, definitely.
So, like, what is the most elegant way that we can present a given idea? That's definitely the question we ask quite a bit.
Yeah, a lot of the puzzles we have, a lot of the stuff in it is way like it's all almost still forced, but there's like an extra clue or a given digit that makes it like even more clear
Yeah.
what's going on, and we generally like that a lot more. Because it's easier for people to see, and a lot of times you put like that extra clue, that extra given digit, and it sort of like, especially for the break-in, it sort of draws people's attention to there more, which is one of the other things I think we both really try to do in the puzzles.
Yeah, I mean, that's telegraphing, right? Telegraphing 101 is actually just draw
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
solver to where you want them to look.
Right.
Yeah, I think telegraphing is the thing that we pay attention to the most when we're setting and when we're test solving our own puzzles. It's very hard to actually think about when you're test solving because you know exactly where to look. But we kind of, we think through where might somebody look if they're looking at a puzzle for the first time. So is it going to be the longest double arrow? I mean, yeah, probably. So we try not to put in another double arrow that's longer, things like that.
Definitely.
I know when we get to the end too, Woofer asks that question a lot of like, is this, is it obvious enough that you're supposed to look in this spot? And we sort of have to have that discussion. And think about it. It's like, well, we think of all the obvious things. Where do people look first? Like he said, the longest Renban, the longest double arrow, given digit looking at a certain spot. And we just kind of, it's something that we almost triple, quadruple check, I think, versus a lot of other things, or especially at the very end when we think when we're happy with at least the logical path.
Yeah.
And then it's a matter of, okay, is this presented in a way that's going to draw people's eyes to that logical path as good as we can do it, as well as we can do it.
Right. Was that always sort of a primary importance when you guys were setting, or is that something that has become more important over time? Oh, sorry.
I think that's something we learned when we were setting that N-Chain puzzle pack.
Mhm.
So our first few puzzles in there were not good, and we had to redo them. And I think
Right.
we really learned the importance of telegraphing just from some solver feedback. There were some, like the first version of one of those puzzles, we were basically told, like, I think it was Amphirio who was testing it, and they got pretty stuck on it. And so we were thinking, how can we rework these clues to make it just easier to see every step in here?
Definitely. I think that's super important in terms of like people being honest with their feedback, so people get the idea that it's important to think about telegraphing when you're actually setting, instead of just like, oh, this puzzle took me like 3 hours and I didn't understand where to look at all, but I'm just going to say it was a good puzzle and add the little check mark and move on with my life. Like, please don't do that. If you've spent a very long time, please tell us that there's something wrong. You need to pay attention. Yeah.
One of the things we've talked about too with that N-Chain pack is that feedback that we got from Amphirio and a few others was some of probably the most helpful, I think, feedback we got, because we were still both very starting novice, whatever term you want to use, at setting. And we were, I mean, it was really great because a lot of the people were sending me constant screenshot updates as they were solving through the puzzles. So we had sort of like a timeline, I guess, if you will, of what, and their thoughts of what they were thinking. And that was super, super helpful. I think we valued that a lot while we were creating that. And it helped us, to get, I guess, to where we are now, right? I think you would probably say. Definitely the part, I think, where we learned the most while setting.
Yeah, and I think since then, the most useful feedback has been from watching solves done on video or on stream, where we kind of see what kinds of steps seem to be making the solver have less fun or just get really stuck.
Yeah, definitely.
When we did that puzzle, when we did the N-Chain puzzle pack, we were trying to get a lot of testers, and as many as we could, really. Whereas now we kind of get like one or two, and they get through it, and they tell us what time they got, and the time seems reasonable, and we're like, all right, I think that's basically how we feel now. Would you say, right? I mean,
yeah, the main purpose of testing now, I think, is for the difficulty. Sometimes our estimate's way off. For Grotus specifically, that puzzle, we originally thought maybe it's a 4 or a 5, especially with the really hard break-in, but then it ended up being 3 stars, which was, I'd say it's a pleasant surprise when the puzzle ends up being easier than you thought. Usually it's not because they're bypassing some logic, and it's usually because it's just like easier to see and more well telegraphed than you originally thought.
Yeah, it's also hard when originally the idea was harder and now it's easier. You still have that sort of lingering, this is more difficult than I think it is idea in your head.
Yeah, for sure.
So speaking of advice, maybe you can offer some advice to the rest of us, because I know that for other people who are trying to do collabs, personally, I get very distracted and put the collab on hold for an indefinite amount of time. I think I have at least 3 collaborations that are on hold right now, or probably will never get done because either we forgot about it or it just didn't, like, there wasn't enough steam. How do you, like, keep an idea alive when you're collaborating?
I think the main thing is, if you have a solid puzzle idea, you should be able to, if you're actually sitting down in a call, I would recommend doing that versus messaging if you really can, if you have the time, because I think that helps a lot. But once you have a solid idea, every single time that we've had a break-in idea, we've been able to get it to the finish line, and I think other setters are probably capable of that as well. Because Sudoku puzzles and really pencil puzzles in general, you start out with so many different solutions that you really have a lot of options. You're rarely ever completely put into a corner with a break-in, so you should be able to finish a puzzle. And so if you actually take the time, sit down, join a voice chat together, talk through stuff, you can probably finish it. And might actually be quicker than you'd expect. And I'd actually recommend solving together as well. I know that I've talked to KNT about this because he solved with Naverio and Totally Normal Cat before, and those are like, they're way better at solving than me and Jacob are. It's like not even a comparison. They can do the hardest puzzles in like an hour or less. But yeah, I think some of their experience is that you get to talk through all the logic, and it's just more fun than solving on your own, and you get to be excited about things that are cool in a puzzle. And it's very similar, I think, to watching something like CTC or Zeta stream, except you actually get to be a part of it.
So many times where we're both like, oh, wait a minute. And then one of us will be like, okay, you go first. And then and then they'll whoever it is will say what we saw, and then we will do that and be like, okay, so what was the thing that you saw? And then I'll be like, oh, it was that, or whatever, or it'll be something else, and then we'll go on another journey, and it might even make the other thing even easier to see, and then you don't have to go through the long convoluted explanation that you had put together, which is nice. Saves time, I guess.
Definitely. Have you guys ever done any collaborative setting outside of your partnership?
No.
No.
Nope.
Maybe at some point. Because I mean, we both know we're both like somewhat active in at least the Puzzle Plaza server and NCTC. So, and I met Math Pesto and Tallcat in person. So maybe with one of them at some point.
I'm kind of somebody that I find it difficult to say no to things.
Right.
So if somebody messages me about like a puzzle, and I think I'm probably more likely to be somebody that gives feedback as opposed to like being super like working fully in a collaboration, I guess. But I wouldn't take anything off the table ever,
Right.
I kind of am somebody where somebody messages me about a puzzle, like, what do you think of this? Or can you try and solve this? I'll pretty much always do it. And then, try and give feedback. I guess the negative side of me is I usually have a difficult time because of what I said earlier about always I generally enjoy everything. It's hard for me to come up with negative feedback, I guess, in general.
Or critical.
I usually
constructive criticism. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not very overly critical of a lot of things, I feel like. But
right.
I don't know. But maybe that's not the person you want test solving your puzzle.
So both send and don't send puzzles to Jacob.
Yeah, if you want, I'll try and solve it. I'm also not. What likely will end up happening is we'll probably try and solve it together.
Right.
And then because I'm not a great solver by any means, really. I can't solve the really super hard puzzles, not on my own, at least. So that's probably what'll end up happening. Although if your puzzle's easy, I'll probably do. So hopefully, at least.
If someone were to ask one of you to collab, would you like assume that they meant that they wanted to collab with you and the other person, or just with you?
I would assume they'd want to do it with both of us, but
I mean, you could just ask, right?
That's true. My initial assumption would be to probably be like, oh, I would just message Woofer and be like, this person wants to do a puzzle with us. What do you think? And then I would be embarrassed when they said, well, no, I just wanted to work with you. And then I'd feel horrible about that whole situation. So that's probably how it would go for me, at least.
I feel like it'd be kind of weird if someone were to ask one of you, and then if you're like, yeah, Woofers is on board, then they would be like, I'm not a Woofers fan, I'm just a Jakhob fan. Like, okay, that's really weird.
Yeah, don't you know we're conjoined twins, so
yeah, exactly.
You can't have one without the other.
Woofers will be on the call, but he won't help.
Yeah. He has to oversee everything I do.
Yeah. So speaking of the sort of thing we talked about before, where some collabs go nowhere, is there a large percentage, or I guess there a small percentage of your puzzles that don't end up getting made? You said that if you find a break-in, you're very likely to finish the idea. Is there ever a chance, or is there ever a time where you literally just can't find a break-in to your idea?
a really good question.
I feel like no. We're
Yeah.
like really good at finishing puzzles. Even that puzzle with the circles and the squares where we gave up and we set the river instead. We did come back to it and came up with slightly different rule set that worked.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd say once we get started on something, we always try to finish it.
I think the thing from my perspective that works really well for us at least is Woofer is always very, very driven, let's say. Like he's really good at keeping, especially somebody like me, focused and on task about like working on the puzzle and pitching ideas and things like that. And I think one of the things that I'm really good at, I guess, I don't know, is being available to work on them. Like that's like one of the, I feel like that ends up being the biggest obstacle though for a lot of people that want to do collaboration is like their schedules conflicting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But usually there's we don't usually ever run into issues like that. And Woofer's really good about making sure things don't get kind of like put on the back burner and forgotten about. I think that's really important too.
It's cool that you guys like mesh so well together and you found each other and started doing this.
I kind of want to talk about Robert's point about setters being the best solvers or not. So definitely not the case, I think, in general. And Zeta's setting video for CTC actually talked about how the advice that he would give is that you can just watch people solve puzzles and you'll get a lot of ideas. But I do think that in our case, it has helped us a lot to challenge ourselves to solve harder puzzles because you don't even know what hard ideas to think of if you haven't exposed yourself to some of those. So, for example, before we set Loop Aquarium, which was that the touching Slitherlink Aquarium combo puzzle, we solved a couple of touching Slitherlink puzzles, which were, I wouldn't say that they were like super challenging, but just getting exposure to the rule set was super important. And then the other thing that we've done recently is just tried to solve harder puzzles in general. Like we solved Magnus Josephson's giant Philomeno puzzle, which I would recommend to everybody because it's maybe my favorite puzzle ever. It took us like 8 hours to solve it together, and we did it all in one night. Finished very late.
It was fun. That was a great night.
I feel like everyone, whenever they spend like 8 hours or something solving a puzzle, especially KNT does this to me all the time. Recommend that I also solve the puzzle. And I spent 8 hours on it. I'm like, I don't want to solve that puzzle now. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that puzzle was interesting because it really did feel a lot like playing a video game where it's just so much content and a very consistent difficulty throughout. And I did say, like, before we solved it, I was like, there's no way we're finishing this tonight. And then we got like halfway through and I'm like, well, there's only like this top third of the Philomeno grid left. How bad can it possibly be?
Famous last words.
Yeah.
But we got to the end of that puzzle and we were both so like blown away. I don't know how else to describe it. We were like, wow, that was awesome. And we were so just, it was a ton of fun. We were exhausted for sure because it was like 4 a.m. or whatever. But we were like, that puzzle was amazing. And yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the time what happens is we'll solve this really hard and interesting puzzle, and then we think, okay, when we're setting, how can we try to do the same thing? What kind of ideas can we come up with that will replicate this feeling that we had when solving for other people?
Cool. So, in contrast to admiration for other people. What's your puzzling pet peeve? Something that you really hate that other people do when they show off a puzzle or set a puzzle? Or is there some constraint you really don't like, or something in setting that you're really annoyed with?
I have a specific puzzle I want to talk about, actually.
Okay.
It's an amazing puzzle. I'll preface what I'm saying with that, but
Okay.
Nihilion's puzzle called Chaos. It's a pure Renban, and we actually set it before we solved it before we set Vivian, which was our first pure Renban puzzle, because we were kind of trying to prepare ourselves for what kind of logic there is in Renban puzzles. And I think the biggest pet peeve for us is when the break-in is not completely obvious and it's at the bottom of the grid. And for that puzzle, what we actually had to do, and I felt bad about it, but I put in the puzzle in true candidate, or like in the solver, and then I ran true candidates after removing some clues until I figured out which clues actually did something. And then from there, we like solved the whole thing and figured it out. That was after about an hour of, trying other parts of the grid that we thought looked more interesting. So the thought that we immediately had after we solved it was like, that was absolutely amazing, and I'm not going to forget it, but I really wish this puzzle was just flipped upside down.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the only other thing I think we both were talked about where we, as a puzzling pet peeve, is the like we just don't care much for like long chains that we can't. Sometimes we'll sit there, and if a puzzle has a long chain in it and we find it, we'll sit there and we'll try and think about, is there some sort of simpler explanation for this, of like, oh, it's really, has to do with the number of fours in these 3 rows or whatever.
Right.
Something, just anything, right? And if we can't come up with anything at all other than just like, you have to plug in a 7 here and then follow that through like 12 steps and then it breaks, we're kind of like, that's not really, we're not about that, I guess, right? That's the only other thing I think we came up with, because a lot of that was something we have talked about in the past too. So those are, I guess, the 2 main things we would say.
Just to ask, to make sure that you guys don't have something planned after this, is it okay if we go 15 minutes over the hour because of the delays and stuff?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I don't have anything for.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Perfect. We will do that then. So, yeah, 15 minutes over the hour. I think that will probably make up for the several minutes we had taken away. So I'm sure you guys have talked about what's your biggest puzzling regret.
Oh, this is another one we talked about a little bit.
Yeah, we have all these questions prepared. It's like bullet points in our doc. So
yeah, they told me they have notes. So.
Yeah.
Pop quiz.
Yeah, for this one, we actually thought we don't have really any regrets with puzzles. We never deactivate puzzles on LMD or anything like that, or unpublish anything. And to some extent, we really like kind of puzzles that are imperfect because it shows our progression as setters. That was especially true for the N-Chain pack because those were our first 12 collab puzzles, and you can kind of see some of the things that we learned even from the beginning of the pack to the end and the progress that we made. So I think that was kind of cool. But yeah, we try to not really look back and regret the puzzles that we made or anything like that, because we can always just make more.
We've even talked about, if anything, that the things you were saying about the N-Chain pack, we almost feel like made it better as a whole, because we thought one of the biggest strengths of the pack was less about the individual puzzles and more about how, if you solve it from start to finish, it sort of takes you along this journey where it sort of teaches you all of the different types of deductions you can make with this constraint, and builds on them from puzzle to puzzle, and combines them with other more common constraints that people are more familiar with. And I think that, so if anything, like he was saying, that's sort of something that we actually like about our puzzles, is the seeing the sort of like the rust, whatever you want to call it, on some of the imperfections, right? And because it's like a story, right? The wooferzfg page is sort of like our journey through being puzzle creators from start to finish.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we also have it was like a 50-page Google Doc with a bunch of F-puzzles, links, and screenshots. The screenshots are just of the final puzzle. But yeah, it's pretty much every puzzle that we set after the N-Chain pack is in there. And so it's kind of like a notebook of sorts, which I think is pretty cool.
That is cool. I keep meaning to like make a Excel spreadsheet or a doc or something of that sort of nature, but it just keeps getting worse every day that goes by that I don't make it.
It's definitely another thing that Woofer's really good at, is keeping us organized and not losing any links or any of our ideas, either in our DMs or in our puzzle doc, or that's very important too, especially when you're somebody that's very forgetful.
Yeah, we keep the links. The links are like every clue that we put in, we'll add a new link to the doc. So you can see the progression of the puzzle.
Oh, that is cool. All right, so probably also, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, it's also the case too, to where it's good because if we progress through a puzzle, which happened recently, and we realize, oh, wait a minute, this other option, this other case we missed, or there's something that is still possible, we can go back in the links to, I think we need to go back to this point and think about the puzzle and realize that this clue didn't do all the things that we thought it did. And that happened very recently, and we had to, so it was really great that we had all those records of everything.
Yeah, definitely. That would definitely be helpful. I just open a million tabs and then put them into a group and close that group and then never look at it again. Probably one thing that you guys have in your notepad of notes is, if you had to set only one variant or puzzle type, what would you choose to set for forever?
Oh God, we didn't have this question.
Oh no. I'm not prepared. Quick, we go into the side huddle.
I definitely think it would be, well, my answer would definitely be Sudoku. How specific does it have to be? Like one constraint?
Yeah, like one constraint.
I'll pick Renban. I liked what Zeta said on stream yesterday about Renban, because it was kind of the same opinion that I had.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's just, especially once we set Beldam and we saw all the stuff that was going on in that puzzle with, I don't want to get too into if people haven't solved it yet, but the stuff we found that was going on in that puzzle, to us at least, was just wild. Like, we were like, this is incredible, like, and that, so, and you kind of have to feel like there's potentially other stuff we can try and figure out with them too. There's still one more Shadow Siren, right?
Yeah. Whenever we have a third unique idea of what to do with Renbans, it'll be Marilyn.
Yeah, name already picked out.
And then I guess a close second would probably be Arrows, because I think those are also super deep. I mean, every great setter has a vanilla arrow puzzle that's like amazing. They're all probably better than ours, but that's fine. We'll have another good one.
So is Jacob going with the accepted answer of Renban, or will you choose something different?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I have to go with Renban. I'm the kind of person that a question like that, it's hard for me not to go this or and say like 2 or 3 things, but I don't want to do that. I'm not going to be flaky. I'll just say Renvan.
Well, see,
I'm
Jacob, we had the opportunity to be able to set puzzles with 2 different constraints, and you threw it away by picking the same answer as me. So now we both have to set Renban puzzles forever.
Well,
Yeah.
I should have said something. I ruined it.
I thought he was going to say Marvel movies.
Yeah, Marvel movie puzzles. That's what
Yeah.
It's the only type of puzzle I would have said.
I think I know the answer to this question, but just in case it's different, Jovial had asked, how do you guys know each other? Gotta do meet.
Yeah, it was through the Wind Waker randomizer. We started talking on Twitter about Wind Waker randomizer. And
yeah,
it worked
Jacob
out really
messaged
well.
me like out of the blue, completely randomly, and said hi, and I was like, "What? Who is this person?" and then we talked the next day, where he was like, "Oh, sorry, I know you. We basically had a mutual friend, so."
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
And it worked out. It actually worked out really great. The timing, because we were trying something new in the Wind Waker community, and then Woofer sort of took that idea and kind of really pushed it in, and it ends up, and now it's a really, really popular type of race that people really like to do. So that was really cool.
And 2 to 10 that asked, and again, we've sort of someone answered this question already, but how would you say your setting styles differ, if at all?
I'd say the main difference is probably that Jacob's like way more patient than I am. So what happens is I really want to finish puzzles, and I'm good at coming up with ideas, but then I think if I was setting alone, I would have the tendency to try to push an idea forward and not take all the time that the idea needs to actually think of the best clues for every situation. And I think Jacob's good at spending time at going through ideas and kind of actually picking the best one.
One of the things we talked about on regards to this was at the beginning of the N-Chain pack, we were both sort of like really far apart on this sort of like style thing, where like I was almost, would you even say maybe trying to be too much of a perfectionist, probably? And then I think Woofer would almost probably say he was more just like trying to, get puzzles done and get as many puzzles out. And now we've sort of both come in from that, almost to basically being about the same, where now I'm much more, because we had a long discussion about it when that happened, when we were working on the N-Chain pack, and we sort of, we discussed about like, there's some merit to, is there something that has to do with this basic idea that's more complex and more interesting we can do? But also there's the other side of it, which is what Woofer said to me, which ended up being what I wasn't really thinking about, was if we have a good idea, we shouldn't just spend a bunch of time trying to arbitrarily come up with a better one if we think this idea is good enough. Right. Or if we really like it. We should, if we think this idea is really cool and we like it, then let's use it, and not try and, and that was something that I think we had talked about that a little bit. And I think that was something that I definitely know we both have kind of like come in on, because now we spend a lot of time on, especially the beginnings of puzzles, I think, way more than we did before.
Yeah, I think one thing we also do more than we did before is, or at least for me, one thing that's changed is I've learned to be more patient in the mid-solve and end-solve and not try to rush with coming up with clues. So we'll try like 10 different clues for every step, and see which one we actually like the most. And that's led to some really interesting endings in some of our recent puzzles.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's go through the rapid fire questions. I'm not sure. We'll just freestyle it. Just say one or the other, fast as you can. Local or global deductions.
Global.
Global, I think. Yeah.
We have a list of these questions, so hopefully you don't ask anything that's not on here.
Oh, are they all the same for both of you?
We talked about how we would answer them, and we don't. Yeah, we kind of agreed on all of them. So
on all of them, okay. Then we don't need to like talk over each other. We can like alternate or something. Because if you guys have decided,
okay. Let's alternate. Jacob, you're going next for once.
Okay, I'll go next. I can do that.
Coloring or good living?
Coloring.
I love how these are rapid fire, but you're reading off of a predetermined list.
Oh no.
Okay, geometry or arithmetic?
Geometry.
Penpa or F puzzles?
F puzzles.
My answer here would actually be Sudoku pad.
We did we talked about that too. Yeah.
Sudoku or pencil puzzles. We didn't say that one.
This one's you.
Whose turn is
This one's you.
It's your turn.
Sudoku, but also pencil puzzle hybrids win.
Okay, chaos or order?
Chaos.
Let's change this one up. Let's go cages or arrows.
Arrows.
Okay, and then lines or dots?
Oh, that's me now. Yeah, it's got to be lines. It's got to be lines. I could say that confidently.
To disambiguate a puzzle, a given or a clue?
Clue. We put in givens quite a lot actually, and we're not afraid to use them, but when you put it in at the very end and it doesn't affect the solve path, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Outside or inside clues?
Inside clues.
Manchester United or City?
I don't watch Premier League, sorry.
Yeah. Same.
Who are you rooting for at the World Cup?
Well, it was the USA.
Okay.
And then today happened. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah, USA is out, so.
Typical Americans.
I don't even know who else is in.
A lot.
Okay, I don't have any more rapid fire questions, so you guys can relax. Put your list down. Which of your guys' puzzles was most important for your development as a group? Was it the end chains pack that was most important for your sort of development? Because we talked about that one a lot, obviously.
I think so. I mean, that's where we definitely learned the most, and on setting, I think.
Yeah, there was one puzzle in there that we redid, was Arrow in the Corner. That was the one that Inferio gave feedback on. And then I think the first puzzle that we finished in the Enchain pack, where we were like really proud of the solve path from start to finish, was the one with thermos. It was called Entangled. That one, I think Jacob came up with the whole break-in for it, and then we together came up with the rest of the steps in it. And the grid ended up being really clean, and then also the solve path had a bunch of steps that we really liked. I think at that point we had a better idea of how to think about clues, and when we add a clue to know how much we like it or not. Because before we were kind of just adding clues to try to force things, but then after that we were very consciously thinking of what is a solve path, which digits did I just get from the previous clues, and how can I use those for the next clue?
Yeah, that's great. Robert asked an interesting question for the rapid fire, but we can just do a normal fire. Do you break a puzzle more often when you're setting or solving?
Wow. We have to break more puzzles when we're setting, right?
Yeah,
feel
for
like
sure.
I feel like
We
our
don't actually
solves.
break puzzles when we're solving very often at all. We solved Magnus's entire puzzle. The whole 8 hours, we didn't break it once. So,
Yeah.
Impressive.
and that's because we're talking through the logic the whole time. But
Right,
then
yeah.
when we're setting, it's like, I know a lot of people have talked about this, but when you break a puzzle, you can learn from it.
Yeah.
There's usually something that you didn't understand about the grid before. So I'll definitely reiterate that point. It's helpful.
Yeah,
Definitely.
when solving too, we because we talk through everything first, usually we'll get partway through an explanation and the other person will be like, "Oh, but what about this case?" And then we'll be like, "Oh, you're right. Dang. All right, so back to the drawing board." So it lends to us not going along a path that ends in failure very often because there's that sort of extra set of eyes to see everything and double check everything. So
Right.
definitely setting, we break puzzles a lot.
There were two other puzzles that we wanted to discuss. I don't think we'll have time for both of them, so let's discuss Vivian if that's of interest to you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, that puzzle is, so I know we talked about Beldum earlier, which was also a Renban puzzle. So Vivian is a Renban puzzle that focuses on geometry, and it's part of a few puzzles that we had with a very similar theme. And I think all of them were inspired by Tallcat's Warsack. I don't know how to pronounce that, but the thermo puzzle with the thermos in all of the corners. So this whole idea of where do these digits go in this other box, and then some sort of coloring based on that. So with Vivian, the break-in, I think we were just kind of drawing Renbands completely randomly and until something happened. So the two lines in the top left are basically randomly drawn, and True Candidate spit out something, and we tried to understand it, and we really liked it. But then we needed to put in that given 2 in the stubby line in box 3 in order to make it something where you can actually see what's going on. And we also consciously wanted to not have the coloring of high-lows be a thing in this puzzle. So we tried to resolve that early on as well with that given 2.
Definitely, and I guess it almost gives more reward to actually figuring out what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this puzzle was also, we had recently gotten feedback from Zeta while he was solving a lockout line and between line puzzle that we made where he didn't like how long we kept the high-low coloring around. So that was some feedback that we kind of implemented in this one, where we really like the break-in and we realized this break-in doesn't really need to have this high-low ambiguity to be interesting. So let's just resolve it right away.
Right.
And then there's also this stuff going on in box 6 where True Candidates confirmed my suspicion that they have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the digit hanging out is a 3, 4, 6, or 7. But then actually proving that was like kind of tricky. And we kind of said, let's leave this as an exercise for the reader and see how people who solve it on stream actually prove that fact. So we had some idea of how it worked, but we didn't like fully think it through. We just knew that it was true for sure.
That was one of those deductions we talked about a lot, and eventually came up with really clean explanations for it afterwards.
Yeah, that's. I remember watching Zeta's stream when he did this, and it seemed intuitively obvious to me why that was the case. But Zeta's very not quick to take the intuitive route, so it was
Yeah.
interesting to see him rationalize it.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's a cool. I thought we thought it was a really cool deduction. The way I always thought about that particular box was thinking about the 1, the 5, and the 9.
Yes, same.
None of them can go on the same Renban of each other, right? And then once you get to the point in the solve where you have the 5 by Sudoku is eliminated from in the box from one of them. So then from the length 4 one, I believe, in that box. So then one of the other 2 Renbans has to have a 5 on it. So if the other one has a 1 and the other one has a 9, then the one that has a 5 has to be 4, 5, 6. I think is basically how I think of it, at least.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember.
All right, that sort of brings us to, I was going to say the end of the 2 hours, but the end of the interview. And I now realize that I've, of course, forgotten to tell you who was next. So I will tell you who's next in chat. Let me make sure I spell this right. Yes, okay, I was. And I don't know.
Exciting.
You can half one syllable of one person, another syllable of another. I don't know. You decide.
Well, okay, so the next setter spotlight is going to be Zegres, and fun fact, we actually have the same first name, like IRL.
That's
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, Zegres has graciously accepted to join in and interview, despite his busy life with 2 kids and such. Other news than that would be that we are taking a slightly different route in terms of the shorts. The Setter Spotlight short series that I've been trying to do is quite a lot more work than it pays off. So I'm gonna not do that for a little while and see how it goes with doing more pre-recorded content in terms of solves and in terms of setting tutorial type stuff. And we'll see if that is more successful or more well received. And we might go back to the setter shorts at some point, maybe if I have more time, or if the community demands it or something. But for now, those are on hiatus. Just letting everyone know in case you didn't see my message in shorts discussion. What else do we have? We will have 2 shorts next week. Those are the last ones that I have in queue, and we will have a pre-recorded video next week as well. So check those out when those come around. Sign up on Patreon if you want to support this space. Obviously, like and subscribe and comment. All the YouTube algorithm things that help YouTube suggest this content to other people. For some reason, I was just about to mention the weird YouTube Bill C11, which is only about Canada, so I shouldn't mention it because literally no one in my audience is from Canada, so it's completely irrelevant to all of you. In case you're wondering, it's a Canadian law, Bill C11, which says that like any production company needs to include a certain amount of Canadian created content when suggesting to Canadian viewers, and which would mean that if it was applied to YouTube, then YouTube would have to suggest Canadian content to Canadian viewers more often, like 60% of the time, versus like something else. It's like they require you to play like more Justin Bieber on the radio or something like that because of that law. but YouTube doesn't want to do that, and I'm honestly a little bit confused. So I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on it, if you have any thoughts on that, because I don't understand what is wrong with that. It seems like that would just be promoting like my content essentially to more people in my country, which I don't really see a problem with personally. But I guess it would be bad for American content creators. But it seems like they're only suggesting it. Well, only Canadian citizens can really do anything about it, so I don't understand what's the problem with it. Anyways, sorry to interlude with Canadian politics and such, but and hold Woofers and Jacob hostage while I do it. But thoughts. Speaking of YouTube being a cesspool, thank you, Kodak. Anyways, that's all for today. Thanks everyone for coming out, and thank you to Woofers and Jacob for spending some time with us and a little bit of extra time because of some technical issues and being patient through those. The last hour was good compared to the first hour.
Yeah. Thanks, Discord.
Yeah. Thank you for having us on, Mercer. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Well, that's it for today, and everyone have a great rest of your day. Happy December. I hope you like Christmas music. Goodbye.